Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/WeHaveWays.
The people at KPMG make the difference for their clients. Talented teams leveraging the right technology to uncover insights that illuminate opportunity. KPMG teams together with their clients, working shoulder to shoulder with them to help grow and transform their enterprise. Are you ready to make the difference together? Go to visit.kpmg.us/transformation to learn more.
Of the Allied Expeditionary Force. You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you.
On the eve of this great adventure, I send my best wishes to every soldier in the Allied team.
The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
The train offered little natural cover, and I arranged the company as best I could. Scarcely had we finished these movements than a British artillery spotter aircraft appeared high above us. This did not bode well, and soon we found ourselves at the center of an artillery bombardment that robbed us of our sense of sight and hearing. It was as though gigantic peas were raining down upon us, 10 impacts simultaneously. The ground shook and trembled as if in a great earthquake. And at once, with so much dust and filth whirling around in the air, it soon became as dark as night. The last 5 Minuten. We recovered quickly from the horror, even though we had never experienced anything like it before. I had never believed such a massive barrage possible. There was nothing we could do but keep our heads down in our panzers and sit it out. We were marooned there for over 8 hours, waiting for the relief to arrive, during which time the same bombardment was repeated several times. The British naval gunnery was so accurate that though we kept changing location, every salvo straddled us while most of the shells exploded amongst us.
And that, of course,
Who was that, Jim?
That was Lieutenant Freiherr Richard Rosen, the campest battalion commander, company commander in all of the heavy Panzer Battalion 503. But interestingly, you could be forgiven for thinking that was the launch of a major operation. It wasn't. That was just an offshore naval bombardment.
That's just housekeeping.
That's just housekeeping. That's just day to day.
Yeah.
That's what's going on the comm front.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, welcome to World War II Pod. We have ways of making you talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. We're on episode 9. Number 9. I
like the way you got in 5 Minuten.
Well,
just a little slip in.
We've got to throw the German fans a bone. Welcome to episode 9 of our.
There's lots of it there. We're mentioning tigers. We're doing all sorts.
This is going to be quite tigery, this episode, isn't it? For all sorts of reasons. This is episode 9 of our D-Day to Overlord Victory in Normandy series. This is probably what was intended to be about episode 6.
3.
Exactly. But them's the breaks, as you know, because containing all this, getting through it all, and trying to offer the kind of detail that is going on, because there are very, very, very many plates spinning in this campaign.
Many moving parts.
Many moving parts. And I think one of the interesting things about that account is the British artillery spotter aircraft. Because what does that tell you?
Tells you that you completely command the skies, and therefore you can command the battleground.
You do what you want. So you can shape the battlefield by doing naval bombardment just for the sake of it. I mean, you've lost if you're on the receiving end of this sort of stuff. Yes, you can put up doughty defences and shit scrambled counterattacks and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
But you've lost. The writing is firmly on the wall if there's a spotter plane just bimbling about, the bloke looking out the window and picking targets.
Yeah.
Because as he says, we move, they shell us. They know where we've gone.
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing is you're kind of thinking, if it's that accurate, how come he didn't get hit? Well, he does get hit. They get hit on the turret.
Yeah.
A massive clang. They're all absolutely shaken inside their tank. But they literally just added extra arm on that before heading to the front. They've only been in the front 3 days when this happens. I think this is the 12th of July. So this is kind of after the fall of Caen, and this is a kind of extra push to the kind of to the south by the Canadians. It doesn't work. They don't get very far. But equally, the Germans, they're getting attrited again. So every time the Allies attack, even if it doesn't work, it's still causing the Germans a lot more harm than it is the Allies. That's the bottom line. Yeah, and the Germans have fed themselves piecemeal into this situation. So these aren't pre-prepared positions. These aren't Gustav lines or it's the 11th of July. This is the 11th of July.
They aren't those kind of things. So it's not like the fighting in Italy where you have prepared positions in the terrain, which favours the defender to the max. That they've been fed in piecemeal, and we're at the other end of the lodgement as well from the fabled bocage, which is causing the Americans such problem. The Germans don't have these advantages in this part of Normandy, do they?
They've got woods and they've got little valleys and there's folds in the land and all the rest of it.
Villages are strong points because you've got that thing of when you go to Normandy, there's sort of big farm compounds, aren't there?
Yeah.
And long stone walls and all that sort of stuff for canalising people. Mm-hmm. But essentially, what you're looking at here is something more like what people would call tank country. Well,
it's very interesting because last week when I was in Normandy following the Sherwood Ranges, we kept going, ideal tank country, but what is ideal tank country?
Well,
is there such a thing as ideal country? Of course there isn't. It's all awful.
Well, it's all awful because if it's a wide open space, they can see you coming. The idea that you can cavalry charges are fine if there's no one else. If there's no one else there or no effective anti-tank weapons. I mean, the other thing that this tells you, this kind of artillery and naval gunnery, is that the Allied operational art is essentially in a state of not perfection, but operating at extremely high level, because to maintain artillery like this, you need all your supplies, all your logistics, all your radios, all your people all sing off the same hymn sheet, your doctrine all straightened out, your lines of communication, the whole thing, your intent, your purpose, everything all coordinated and all worked out together. And I think if you want a tell of how an army's doing operationally, it's artillery that tells you, because you need your bridges in place, you need your infantry in place so that your guns are protected, you need, and also so they're offering you targets. You need your air sorted, you need your supply sorted. So if you want to wet your finger and stick it in the air and take which way the wind's blowing, it's artillery that tells you the state of the operational art.
Yep.
And the Allies famously are supposed to rely on artillery, but that's because they've got their operational art down. So of course they do. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? And it's the one feature that German soldiers say over and over and over and over again.
Never seen anything like it.
Never seen anything like it. It doesn't matter how bad it was in Russia. Yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
Never seen British artillery, and particularly British artillery concentrations. Nothing like it. Not since worse than Stalingrad and all that. Anyway, so
where are we? We left it at the last episode in kind of sort of middle of July.
So the Allies have been ashore a month.
They've been ashore a month.
The lodgement is completely joined out. It's expanding.
Yep, but progress hasn't been made anything like as much on the map. And we were talking in the last couple of episodes about the influence of the V1 attack and what that does to the Normandy campaign, which I think is considerable. And what you've got in the British-Canadian sectors, you've got a series of operations all being launched at the same time. So you've got this one that's going around Caen. You've got Operation Jupiter, which is launched that same day, which is an attempt to retake Hill 112, which for those of you who were listening to the earlier episode, I think episode number 7, Operation Epsom. Yeah. Where the Scottish corridor, and they'd taken it, and Dempsey and O'Connor, commander of British 8 Corps, make the decision to pull back from Hill 112 to just over the River Odon, and
so that they're not salients are nipped off.
Yeah, exactly. At the same time, Mare 2 is being launched, which is just on the right hand flank of that. So you're kind of drawing away troops from Hill 112, and as Jonathan Ware, has friend of the show, has convincingly argued, Hill 112 is what it's all about, because it's the key bit of high ground in this I suppose, northern half of the Normandy battlefront. And when you're on there, I have to say it's hard to kind of disagree with it.
Yeah, and in terms of drawing the Germans into committing there.
Right, exactly.
Which is what it's all about. It's drawing the Germans into commit and get attrited, which is where we came in, really.
Exactly. But at the same time, the US forces are now pushing south from the Cotentin Peninsula, and this is on the western end of the Normandy front, and this is real, proper bocage. And actually, I was talking to some of the Americans I was with in Normandy last week. They were saying, no one really knows about this. This is the total unknown story.
Yeah.
Is the story of once 4th Division, 90th Division, the 9th Division have taken the Cotentin Peninsula, they then have to turn around again and come back south.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that no one's talked about.
This is the yard by yard stuff.
This is the yard by yard. This is super tight hedgerows.
100% casualties in infantry divisions.
Horrendous. This is pre the Rhino, the hedge cutter being developed. It's being developed, but it's not in action at this point. And at the same time, the 29th Infantry Division are on that ground, that ridge line to the northeast of Saint-Lô, that key city, which was supposed to have been taken in the first few days, around Hill 192. Now, we're going to be, subsequent, when we go to Normandy at the beginning of June, we're going to do 2 special episodes, one on Epsom and Hill 112, and another one on the fighting around the ridgeline of Hill 192. So that's still to come. So we're going to sort of skirt over these battles.
Those will come out a couple of weeks after this does.
Yes.
Because we have to go to Normandy, we have to record them, and Joey's our operational level guy. He's our Mulberry, our one-man Mulberry. He's our
chief of staff. He's our Freddie de Gangan.
Exactly. He has to make sure it's edited.
He's our Chet Hansen.
Exactly. But I mean, this is the interesting thing, because we talk about the tactical, the operational, the strategic, but there's the political level in war always. Which I think is always actually separate to strategy. You can have
linked.
Well, they're conjoined, aren't they?
Yes.
Because what will happen is political pressure will start to put pressure on strategic impetus, basically. And how is this working out? And there is impatience in London because of the V-weapon campaign. No doubt about it. You want to explain that? It's easy to explain. Mm-hmm. And of course, that offers an explanation for why people are getting so antsy in London, but also demonstrates perhaps on how essentially unrealistic they're being. Because after all, the V-weapons are coming from Holland. And the idea that you'll be able to break out of Normandy in the next fortnight, if only you speed things up, and you'll be in the Netherlands, the week after next, is essentially touched, really, as an appraisal of the situation, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, completely. There's no question, by the middle of July, they're thinking, well, we've got all these assets, and actually, if one was to look around Normandy, the Allied bridgehead at this time, all you'd see is just huge ammo dumps, huge fields of field hospitals, all the beaches, Utah, Omaha, they'd just be full of barrage balloons, of trucks, of LSTs, landing ships, moored along the, pulled up on
workshops.
And workshops and fields full of tanks. And you'd also see fields full of wrecked tanks, which have already been moved off the battlefield, particularly enemy ones. Yeah. Huge, great fields near Isigny, for example, which is not very far from Carentan. Yeah. And they're just full of dead panthers and dead half-tracks and scrap metal and so on. So you're getting this sense of this enormous material wealth. And so the guys back in Washington and back in London are going, well, hang on a minute, come on, what's going on?
We've sent you 5,000 tanks. What's the hold-up?
Come on, boys. Yeah. Put your shoulder to the wheel and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But of course, it's not as simple as that, because they're just looking at maps and they're just looking at statistics and they're looking at figures, and there's a whole other level to this. And I think there is a sense between Montgomery, 25th Star, who is the overall ground commander still at this point, Dempsey, who is the British Second Army commander, Simmons, who's the Canadian
chief,
and Bradley, who's the US First Army commander, that the floodgates are about to burst, that they're not far off. And that's where they're kind of sort of, and that's where they're planning. And it's interesting because Monty in the past, I think, has been kind of really well protected. He's been protected by Alexander in the build-up to Alamein, Second Alamein, back in October 1942.
And for Husky. And for getting into it in mainland Italy, yeah.
He's obviously protected by Freddie de Gangan, who is his very charming and much more diplomatic chief of staff. But de Gangan is back in main headquarters back in Portsmouth. Yep. So he's not out here. and he hasn't quite got someone to kind of...
He doesn't have an intermediary to smooth over the
exactly that
traces. I mean, Gangel's fascinating. Basically, he has all the nervous breakdowns that Montgomery by right should be having, doesn't he?
Yes.
He goes away and has them quietly somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, every now and again he takes time out, doesn't he, to have his nervous breakdown, pull himself together, come back. Because he's carrying Montgomery's nervous load, isn't he?
Yes.
In a way. He is such an interesting and impressive fellow who we don't have time for.
No,
there we go.
Sorry, Freddie, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Another time. We can do a whole feature on him one day.
But Monty's also crashing around. He's saying things that... I mean, you see, you've got a quote here, and I can't... Is this like Monty's impish humour misfiring? Because very often the things that seem to be him being very rude.
Possibly.
You know what I mean?
Possibly, but, you know, it's kind of read the room.
I say... He visits...
Okay, so basically what happens is Bradley visits his TAC HQ back on the 30th of June, and he takes with him Major Chet Hansen, who is Bradley's senior aide. And Monty looks at Hansen, realises he's a major, and says...
I say, now, do you have a major for an ADC? Simply a dog's body, you know, a whipping boy. I would not have an ADC as more than a captain.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I think
and then he launches into a critique of the M1 helmet.
Yeah.
But why? Why would you do that?
Well, he's got no small talk, has he?
He's got no small talk. He's filling air.
He's filling, yes, exactly. It's some dead air. I mean, what's their small talk like? Because this is the other thing with these accounts of Monty, is we do not, it's never on record what they may have said. I mean, maybe they went, your helmet's shit. And he went, well, actually, yours has got its own disadvantages. Thanks very much.
I doubt it. But
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you
no, I agree.
Because very often in these accounts that they tend to be, and then he said this terrible thing, and it maybe they turned up and they were being inane and asinine and
it may well be.
You know,
but
anyway.
The point is that there is no question that Monty has a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders. Because of what's going on with the V1s, because of what's going,
but also
but
the absolute kicker is the manpower crisis.
Yes,
and this is a really interesting point of controversy, because some people like to say there is no manpower crisis. The British aren't short of people. I mean, after all, there's a whole lot of people who've disappeared right into the system who haven't turned up for conscription, so why not round them up, why not find them, and all this sort of stuff. But there is a genuine problem that they're chewing through infantry at a rate that they hadn't projected, they hadn't prepared for, because the way the Germans are hanging on has not met their calculations, expectations.
Yes, because they thought there'd be bigger breaks.
They thought there'd be bigger breaks.
So what they think is big battle, Germans retreat, pause for 3 weeks.
Like in Italy.
Pause for 3 weeks, build up again, next phase. But it's just happening all the time.
It's relentless
and that's the problem.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting, because one of the great criticisms in the Carlo d'Este book is this thing about this infantry. And there is this amazing academic paper, and I just can't remember the name of the guy who did it, who is, you know, he's a proper kind of, you know, professor of history. And he absolutely demolishes the Carlo d'Este argument, saying, you know, he simply does not know what he's talking about, and he then goes down in exhaustive detail exactly why Monty was completely right and Carlo d'Este is completely wrong. But anyway, to cut a long story short, on the 10th of July, General Ronald Adam comes over, who is the
Adjutant General.
So he's the man in charge of it all.
The actual bloke in charge of the army.
Right. And he comes over and says, look, you know, we're in a big problem. And one of the reasons is because of the V1s. Because there are 172,815 personnel in anti-aircraft units in the UK.
Yeah.
And before the 13th of June, when the first V1 comes over, the plan by Brooke and Adam is to send over 50,000 of these and retrain them as infantry and get them to join 21st Army Group.
Yeah.
But the one thing you can't do when your nation is under attack is not defend
reduce your home defences.
Reduce your home defences. So they can't. So on paper, they have 95 infantry battalions in the UK. And when you think that you would have 9 for a division, you know, that sounds like there's quite a lot. But there's only 5 regular battalions. The remaining 9 are TA, reserve or holding battalions. And of these, only 26 are up to strength.
Yeah.
And the rest are either under strength, incomplete, not fully trained, or earmarked for Southeast Asia, Burma, or Italy, or lower establishment and home defence only. So it's not as easy as clicking your finger and going, send them over to me, because they don't really exist. A lot of them are kind of holding units and holding divisions, which are never going to ever be activated. You know, these are feeder ones, but you've got to train people. And the real thing to understand is that, unlike the Germans, the British are not prepared to change their modus operandi.
Yeah.
So their modus operandi is to make sure that they've still got people working in factories, that they've still got people going down the pit dig out coal, you've still got people manning the anti-aircraft batteries, that you've still got people doing the artillery, you've still got 43% of your troops doing service corps, because that's how the army functions.
And you aren't filling the gaps with Polish, French, Dutch slave labour.
And you're not filling the gaps with people who are undertrained.
Yeah.
You're not cutting corners, because we all know where that leads.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that the V1 campaign isn't a sidebar. You know, it can be told as sort of, and another story about the summer of 1944, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's a sort of sidebar. It's completely part of the strategic thinking, because it's so political. Yeah. And the thing is Hitler sees it as a political weapon. Yep. It's vengeance bombing for blitzing. And the idea that a democracy isn't going to find that extremely difficult to digest and then respond to, you know, of course it's the thing that's agitating everyone. Of course it's the thing. It's the you know. And interestingly, whatever pressure's coming from Washington, Eisenhower is in Britain. He knows what's going on. Yep. He's experiencing it himself. And all the way through 1944 and early 45, the V weapons is a part of the picture for everything and can't be underspoken. I think. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I would. And I think but the main thing is you've got this manpower crisis. You haven't got enough infantry. You need to get forward. Everyone's going, hurry up. But at the same time, you've got to conserve manpower, because at the end of the war, you know, Britain knows that the USSR is growing in strength. They know that the USA is growing in strength militarily, and they know that they still need to have a big seat at the top table
need to be
when the negotiations are happening.
So
you've got this problem on your hands, you know. So it's a really, really hard juggling act. So the long short of this is they're now planning, okay, so we've got this situation, we've got this short power, it's a bit more of a grinding battle than we thought. What are we going to do? How are we going to kind of get this breakthrough? And they have this big meeting on the same day that he sees Adam with Dempsey, with Bradley, and they meet to plot and to plan and kind of, you know, what are we going to do? Brigadier Charles Richardson, who is the head of the 21st Army Group, he's the chief planning officer, says, look, you know, we are short of work. Can you use the armour a bit more? So here comes the kind of seeds of Operation Goodwood. Yeah. At the same time, Bradley is gearing up for his big offensive, which is going to be called Cobra. And that's going to be a drive from the western side, southwest of Saint-Lô. But they've got to take Saint-Lô first. And they still haven't. So they're just about to launch a renewed offensive from that ridgeline that 29th Infantry Division is onto the northeast of Saint-Lô. So that's going to happen, and then Cobra's going to be launched after that. And he's intending on using very kind of heavy air power, coordinated air power. But at the same time, the British are going to do another operation, and this is to try and route the bulk of the Panzer divisions onto their side of the battlefield to free up Bradley's Operation Cobra.
And in effect, what you're looking at here is a embryonic ground encirclement, isn't it? The idea is you glue the Germans to the British end, and then the Americans swing round. And this has also kind of been what they're trying to do all along. This is an extension, actually, of the grand strategy that Montgomery's had in mind, and his team, and everyone that agreed to it. Because after all, this is all. A lot of the historiography gets bogged down in, well, if it doesn't work, it's Monty's fault. This is. You've just described a collegiate planning meeting where everyone gets together and discusses their problems.
Yes, it is, and it's remarkable how collegiate it is, really, when you think about it. Yeah. But Dempsey, I mean, he's interesting because he tends to give objectives which are the kind of for any battle plan, which are a kind of upper reach of what is achievable, high end of what is achievable. Because his theory is that you never want to get into a situation where you haven't got you overreach yourself and you haven't then got a plan. So always plan for the kind of, the absolute outmost of what is the top of what is possible. Okay, a parallel, the Battle of Cambrai. Mm-hmm. In the Great War, which is the first mass. I mean, if we're talking about big mass users of armour. What goes wrong with that is that they haven't planned for how well it goes. The tanks outrun the infantry. So he's trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Right. He's thinking in those. That's the right thing to do. Of course, it's the right thing to do. But what happens? But this is fundamental. This is fundamental to how you plan things. You plan for high tide, don't you? Not in the expectation that you'll make it, but you've got the resources. You've got the thinking in place. So the aim is to get onto the Bourg-Boss Ridge, which runs from the kind of sort of southeast of Caen. So you have Caen, and then the land rises, and it's kind of, when you're there, it's not, we're not talking about one of these huge great ridges, but it's appreciable when you're on the top of it. Stand on top of it. And then there's a kind of high flat plateau which basically runs all the way down to Falaise for 20 miles. And this is what the British originally wanted to get so they could put airfields up there. As it turns out, they've got plenty of airfields behind the bridgehead, but it's all getting a bit cramped. But they want to get onto that high ground because, again, you're then denying it to the enemy as well as gaining it. But as Dempsey develops his plan, he starts to think, well, actually, maybe this could get a breakthrough. And the idea is to attack with all 3 armoured divisions he's got, which are kind of exploitative divisions rather than grinding divisions, if you see what I mean. But Monty says, not sure about this. I think just try and get to the Burger Boss Ridge. That is much more realistic. But both Dempsey and O'Connor still stick with this kind of higher end of what might be achieved.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the big controversy comes, because Bradley has been using is planning to carpet bomb the area through which he's going to attack ahead of Cobra.
Yep. And
Dempsey thinks, well, this would be really useful for Goodwood too.
Yep.
And Monty is always up for using heavy air power if that means he can save his infantry.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, he's under huge pressure to do so. So this makes sense. But using the heavy bombers in a very kind of large-scale effort is quite a big ask.
Yep.
It's not something you ask every week.
No.
So Eisenhower goes, I can see that this is, this is a good plan. And he's looking at Dempsey's original plan.
Yeah.
With the kind of, we could get to fillets as the target.
Yeah, but
and Tedder agrees too.
Yeah, but imagine you're going to your boss's boss, and you're presenting him with a thing that demands a special request, an extra favour. You're gonna say,
pick it up.
Yeah, of course you are.
So when Eisenhower goes, and do you think this have a breakthrough? Monty sort of goes, well, all things being well, yes, even though secretly he doesn't think that.
No.
But he knows that if he doesn't big it up, he's not going to get...
He's not going to get the resources.
He's not getting the resources. So he just thinks, sort of, I'm going to go for it.
This is so interesting now, because this has become a point of gallons of ink have been spilt about this.
I think Monty's absolutely right.
But also compare this to their counterparts. People saying, I must have all the panzers to myself. First of all, the decision-making is all laid out. We can go and have a look at it. We can all see it. It's not all inact and nabal of German decision-making, is it?
No.
And the squabbling and the egos and the, people who are sacked suddenly reappearing and all that German chaos in command. Here it all is, and this all, to my mind, as you say, Jim, this makes perfect sense.
But the point is that when Monty speaks to Eisenhower and Tedder, he knows perfectly well that they're thinking this is going to be the chance for a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
He doesn't think that's likely, but he's not disabusing them of their aspirations for it.
Yeah,
that is the controversy.
Do we call it a white lie?
No, we just call it a kind of not being 100% straight. But otherwise, he wouldn't get the air assets.
Yeah, but he's
under pressure to preserve manpower.
But also, he's someone who knows how to win Montgomery in all sorts of different ways. And this is him trying to win an argument.
But also, it's the key point about all of this is that this is all about how you harness ever-growing and developing air power.
But they're using strategic bombing, so air power is absolutely central to this. And we touched on it earlier with the spotter plane bimbling around.
Yep.
The Allies have control of the sky. Strategic bombing has been seconded to the overlord to Schaeff. Mm-hmm. They're no longer flattening cities merrily. They're now at the disposal of Eisenhower's ground commanders. So you've got strategic bombing, you've also got Second Tactical Air Force.
Well, you've got Second Tactical Air Force, and you've also got Ninth Air Force.
Yeah.
So you've got two, and you've got. But what you've also got is rapidly developing tactical air power. So this is what I love about the Tactical Air Force commanders, and just the air commanders generally. This ever since they started in the Mediterranean, back end of kind of 1941, and you have that kind of huge, great development in the summer of 1942. Then you have further developments where the Americans really buy into it in Tunisia and so on in the winter of 42, 43, and so on and so forth. And it's been further developed in Italy in the early part of 1944. You've got these people who are really dynamic, really into it, really wanting to kind of get better and better and better. And in the Second Tactical Air Force, there's the introduction of the VCP, which is a visual control point. And this is basically the Rover Davids, which have been developed in the early part of 1944 in Italy. And the idea is that you have a ground controller, an RAF guy on the ground in an armoured car, in a kind of dingo or a scout car or something, with a forward observation officer beetling around and then radioing back to the squadrons. Yeah. And you have cab ranks. So you do for the first time ever, you have these people that you have squadrons who are just homing around waiting to be told what the target is. Yeah. And Harry Broadhurst, who is the commander of 83 Group, which is the main kind of fighter force, which is now in Normandy, has also set up his tactical headquarters and right next to Dempsey. So they're completely, absolutely wedded to the hip. And at the same time, Pete Quesada, who is an incredibly enlightened and dynamic commander of 9th Fighter Command, which is part of the 9th Air Force, the fighter wing of the 9th Air Force, has also developed something called the armoured column cover, which I think is really, again, it's a kind of it's a level ahead. So the idea is that you actually have a pilot, because their squadrons are kind of 45 pilots strong to have 16 in the air. They can afford to rotate pilots down onto the ground, and because they're already in Normandy, it's not a big exercise.
Big ask, no.
So you can have these people doing kind of sort of 24 hours or 48 hours or something with an armoured group, an armoured column. So you put a pilot in the lead tank, and he's on a VHF radio. And they've also got the cab ranks of fighters, and he can talk to the squadron commander or the flight commander or whatever in the lead plane on his VHF radio. And this has two advantages. First of all, it stops blue on blue, because he can say, we are here, this is us. That column that you can see beetling down that road, that's not enemy, that is us. Whereas the guys in the air can go, oh, watch it, just round that corner, there's an 88mm, or we'll go and bomb that. Or the guys on the ground can go, we're having some incoming artillery fire from X. Can you go and investigate and shoot it up? Which they do, and it's incredibly successful.
But what you've got here within the lodgement is the creation of a sort of home advantage, isn't it? Because the Germans don't have airfields anywhere near Normandy at this point, do they? Because they daren't. No. And you've got planes that are in the air. They're doing an hour up in the sky. They come back down, they refuel, they rearm, and off they go again.
We go again.
And everything's within 10 minutes of takeoff.
Yep.
So you've basically got, as well as the strategic bombers, you've got this permanent thing.
Yes, but also the more you're flying, the more you understand the landscape, you get familiar with it. So you're no longer flying over strange countryside. You're flying over familiar countryside, which is where the kind of the static nature of the warfare actually really benefits you. Because you suddenly go, oh yeah, I know that road. That's the kind of the Veer road, or that's the Falaise road, or whatever.
Which then later on in Northwest Europe, when things are much more fluid, this is far more difficult.
Yes, exactly.
And the way the Germans are chosen to fight, the way the lodgement's worked out, offers a home advantage to the air forces that in a way is a force multiplier in itself. The way that the Battle of Britain home advantage is a force multiplier in terms of hours in the sky.
Of course.
It's exactly the same calculation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, okay. I'll tell you what, we will take a break. We'll return with the German situation, and then
we'll rattle through Goodwood and Cobra.
Rattle through Operation Goodwood, why not?
And Operation Cobra.
Yeah, and Cobra, blimey. Oh, well, good luck everyone. See you after the break. Let James Holland take you to places in history you've never been before. The Savage Storm is the fascinating new book which brings to life the story of our Allied forces as they crossed into southern Italy in 1943. With unflinching and insightful detail, Holland places you in the heart of the action of this pivotal and brutal World War II battle. The Savage Storm is out now and available from all good bookshops. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Murray and James Holland, episode 9 of Decision in Normandy. We're not calling it that.
What are you saying?
Victory in Normandy. It's a victory for heaven's sake.
Why the Allies are brilliant.
And
the Germans are crap.
So on the 15th of July, Rommel tells von Kluge he's lost...
And you remember that von Kluge has taken over from von Rundstedt when he's been sacked.
Yeah. Rommel tells von Kluge he's lost 97,000 men since...
97,000.
And only had 6,000 replacements. So when we talk about an Allied manpower crisis in part 1...
it's all relative.
It's relative. It's actually worse than that. It's about 100,000 of...
By the 7th of July.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And it's offshore naval guns are the things that he's bothered about.
He's particularly bothered by that, and obviously in all the Yarbos, the fighter bombers and all the rest of it.
Then on the 11th of July, von Kluge at La Roche-Guyon, they meet, and he admits that Rommel was right.
Yes, because when he turns up at the beginning of July, he sort of goes, "Oh, nonsense, we can do this. Don't be such a pessimist." And then he sort of goes, "Oh no, Irvin, you were completely right. I was wrong."
And then a week later, 17th July, Panzermeyer is summoned to a meeting south of Caen with Dietrich, Eberbach, and von Kluge.
So Eberbach has taken over from Beer von Treppenberg.
It's all these, like the reshuffling.
It's a reshuffling constantly.
Yeah, constantly.
So he's now in charge of Panzer Group West, which is not very much.
Yeah.
Dietrich is the is first SS Panzer Corps. Von Kluge's overall in charge.
And then Rommel joins them, and they have a frank conversation, don't they?
Well, yes, and Sepp Dietrich is really interesting, because he's a former kind of street thug.
Yeah, he's an old fighter.
He's an old fighter, and he's proper SS and all the rest of it. And if he's openly condemning the conduct of the campaign, which is ultimately coming from Hitler and OKW, then
Yeah. Panzer says later, during the course of the conversation... During the course of the conversation, it became apparent that there was an agreement between the Commander-in-Chief, the Commanding General, and myself on the impossibility of the present situation.
Yeah, and then Rommel turns up.
Yeah.
And Mayer says to Rommel, he says, look, it's not the troops on the ground that are the problem, it's the air power. At which point Rommel just goes... absolutely explodes, because... Yes, of course it's the bloody air power. That's what I've been saying for ages. And he then has this massive rant and he goes, and he says, I've been saying all this, but the higher-ups know better, of course. They don't believe my reports anymore. Something has to happen. The war in the West has to end. But what will happen in the East?
Listeners will recall in episode 1, Rommel's going, are they going to send 1,000? Luftwaffe's going to send 1,000 fighters. Everything's going to be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, he realises he's been cheated too, and he's got, Rommel is a swings and roundabouts kind of guy. He's either kind of sort of up for the fight and full of vim and verve and all the rest of it and chutzpah, or else he's kind of down in the dumps and kind of feeling gloomy. And he's now hit one of his gloomy faces. Anyway, there is absolute chat on that day about... maybe it's time to kind of throw in the white tie with the West. Yeah. And then we can all focus on defeating the kind of, the Russian bear, etc., and the communist threat.
Right.
But he drives off. He drives off and probably gets shot up by Flight Lieutenant Charlie Fox, a Canadian from 412 Squadron, and that's the end of Rommel. To cut a long story short.
Like, how do you prove someone right about air power? Shoot them up with your aircraft.
So, Marx has been killed, von Treppenberg's headquarters have been shot up, and now Rommel's gone. And, what's he supposed to do? What's the guy got to do?
What's the guy got to do around here to beat the Allies? And now we come to Operation GOODWOOD.
So that is on the 17th of July.
Yeah.
The following day, in the morning, it's kick-off for Operation GOODWOOD.
Yeah.
They've got 6 bridges, which they can get across the... The whole idea is this is to drive south-east of Caen.
So to come round Caen.
Around Caen on the eastern side. So this is using that big, long, flat stretch where the drop zone was for 6 Airborne, near Ronville. That's the kind of start point. So they're going over Pegasus Bridge. They're going over the Horsa Bridge.
And all the other bridges that have been put in,
But they've only got 6, and that's not enough for everything they need.
Yeah. And, I mean, the fire plan... The fire plan for GOODWOOD is absolutely boggling. So you've an artillery fire plan and you've the Bomber Command fire plan. Bomber Command, they're going to drop 5,620 tons of bombs. I mean, what?
Yeah.
It's absolutely extraordinary. And then you've got divisional artillery groups. That's the phase 1, which is the aircraft bombardment.
And to put that in some perspective, they actually drop, in the end, they drop 6,800 tons of bombs. Okay, to put that in perspective, that is more than a third of the total tons of bombs dropped in London in the entire war.
Yeah. And then the artillery fire, that as they call them fires now, don't they? Is artillery groups from 3rd Division, 51st Division, 3rd Canadian Division, 55th Field Regiment, 3rd Royal Horse Artillery, 4th Agra, 8th Agra, HMS Roberts, Enterprise and Mauritius, all joining in with a counter-battery programme coordinated by HQ 4th Agra. Then 318 mediums from the US 9th Air Force as well. I mean, it's
absolutely enormous.
It's no fun being a German at this point.
No, it isn't. So Monty hand writes his instructions to Dempsey on the 16th of July, and he goes, to engage German armour in battle and white it down to such an extent that it is of no further value to the Germans as a basis of the battle. To gain a good bridgehead over the River Orne through Caen, and thus to improve our positions on the eastern flank. Generally, to destroy German equipment and personnel. So there's no breakthrough there.
No. But there is as explicit an expression of Allied strategy and intent in Normandy.
Grind the Germans down.
Generally to destroy German equipment and personnel.
And anchor those German panzer divisions here so they don't go and interrupt Cobra.
Yeah. It couldn't be more explicit, could it?
No.
So GOODWOOD starts on the 18th July, 44,892 men, 1,098 tanks, 11,772 vehicles. And this is Pip Roberts with 11th Armoured. They're heading for the Bourguiba Ridge.
1,056 heavies,
500 medium bombers operating between 6,000 and 8,000 feet, which is very, very low for that.
Yeah, in daylight as well, which is a thing for Bomber Command people.
And our good friend Lieutenant Rosen, who we met at the start of the episode, he's in the middle of this. He's tossed and pummeled as he tries to tighten himself into a ball. And after the first wave is over, he discovers that Tiger 312 is upside down. This is a 56-ton tank.
Yeah.
And his own 311 has been shifted quite a long way. And Rosen says, "Of the once so beautiful parkland, nothing remained but shredded trees, churned meadows, and giant bomb craters, so numerous they overlapped, a grey, repulsive moonscape, and mist of dust which made breathing difficult. Through the thick fog, it was possible to see the red glow of trees and cornfields burning."
I mean, as you can hear, he's so shaken by that bombardment, his voice has changed completely from earlier.
From camp reason to...
So, off 11th Armoured go, and there's a problem, isn't there? One of the issues is there's also a narrow gauge railway that goes across the battlefield, and there's only one bridge under it. So even though there are these great wide open spaces, and there's no doubt there are some cavalry people in 11th Armoured thinking, "Jolly good, tally-ho, off we go." But if you've got to queue for a narrow gauge railway bridge to get under the railway line, it's not quite...
Last one under's a rotten egg.
And all that, yeah. And there are casualties, and it's mainly to anti-tank guns. And there's the fond look stories around this that we won't bother with. But they do all right. They go 7 miles.
It's basically exactly what Monty predicts.
Yeah.
So they make the big progression. They do kind of 5 miles on the 18th.
Yeah.
They do a couple more on the 19th. Then it runs out of steam because it's raining on the 20th, and there's several days of rain.
And also because you do run out of steam.
You do run out of steam.
Yeah.
So Eisenhower's absolutely furious and rails about kind of, it costing 1,000 tons of bombs per mile.
Yeah.
But, against the anchor of German panzers, I mean, so what?
Yeah.
But all of this does need some context, because the casualties are considerable. And everyone always says, they only got 7 miles and 400 tanks were knocked out. And you have to sort of go, well, 7 miles in a big scheme of things for a major operation, it's not the breakthrough, but that is quite a big bite.
Yeah.
You've got the Burgos Ridge. You're now on the high ground.
Yeah.
You are now plumb position for next phase.
Because the thing is, I mean, if you are on the Burgos Ridge, you can see all the way down to Sword Beach. You can see past the silos at Colombelle. You can see the whole of the Breville Ridge. You can see pretty much all of the eastern end of the British lodgement.
Yes.
And if you control that, if you've kicked the German OPs off there, and then what's not to like?
Well, absolutely nothing. And you're up against this array of panzer divisions, albeit ones which are increasingly depleted. But also, that first bite is going to be the hardest bite. Yeah. So you've just made your lives a whole load easier. And the other thing is that the casualties, those 400 panzers, those 400 tank casualties, which always seem so excessive and so kind of, careless and all the rest of it in the way the narrative is told, also needs quite a lot of kind of, it's nuanced and it needs a bit of kind of context to it. So, for example, if you take the 2nd Northamptonshire Yeomanry, for example, who are in Cromwell's, they lose 37 of their 57 tanks in their 3 Sabre squadrons.
Right.
Okay, but of the 185 men in those 37 tanks, only 25 are casualties.
Right.
So most of them are not destroyed tanks, they're knocked out tanks. And as we've discussed in earlier episodes, a knocked out tank is not the same as a destroyed tank. What you're trying to do on the day, it is true, on the day, over 400 tanks are made unoperable. But that doesn't mean to say they're destroyed. And this is the key thing. So actually 493 tanks of the 1,098 are destroyed. So
damaged.
They're damaged.
That's the important word.
Yes.
Because this could mean shedding a track. This can mean...
Yes, it can mean your gear's broken.
Exactly.
You've lost a sprocket.
Or your bogged.
Or your radio is dis. Or it could be any... Or you've hit a wall and can't get through it. Or
exactly.
It can mean any number of things.
Yeah.
But actually, of those 493 which are damaged, only 156 are written off.
Right.
136 tank crew, individuals.
So that's sort of...
divided by 5.
Well, there's 1,000 tanks committed, so that's what?
5,000 tank crew.
Yeah, but in terms of vehicles, that's like 15%.
Yes, so 136 tank crew killed out of 1,000.
Yeah, there's
500.
Yeah,
it's not a lot.
No,
for a major battle.
Yeah, and for 7 miles.
For 7 miles.
Yeah.
218 of those tanks are back in action within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, 62 more in a matter of days. So actually, only 156 tanks aloft out of 3,500 that you've got in theatre, which I would say is not bad. The really big hit for Goodwood is not armour, which is what it's usually said. It's actually the infantry, because there are a lot of infantry involved still. Yeah. And it's 3,432 infantry killed in action, missing in action, or wounded in action. That's quite a big hit.
That's very interesting to frame it like that, to look at it like that, because it's the last great charge of the British armoured divisions, all that.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
But actually it's not.
Yeah, it actually it's not. And also, a similar opportunity doesn't present itself, really, does it, during the rest of the war? So they don't do it again. So it is the last time they do it, because they don't do it again. Also, your operational art improves after that, and you figure out how not to.
Well, yeah, and you realise that just going with your exploitative, your breakthrough armoured divisions isn't the way to go. Yeah. And they hone it, and we shall see in the next episode. Yeah. But German losses: 83 tanks destroyed, including 26 Panthers, 7 Tigers, and 3 King Tigers, and the 16th Luftwaffenfeld Division, which has literally just arrived, is just basically destroyed. Yeah. So Monty is quick to take the criticism. He doesn't kind of pass it on to Dempsey or O'Connor for being over optimistic or anything like that. He absolutely takes it firmly on the chin. But as far as he's concerned, he's had an absolute result. Yeah. And he knows perfectly well he's not going to be sacked. Yeah. He's the most popular general in Britain. That's not going to happen. And Tedder can rant all he likes. Yeah. Who cares?
And then the July plot happens, which isn't noises off. That's a thing that affects absolutely everything if you're on the German side, and actually peculiarly on the Allied side, because the German attitude changes.
Well, they're even more resolute to just keep fighting for every yard.
Exactly.
And you can forget any further talk of kind of sort of throwing in the towel in the West by the German commanders.
Now, Cobra is meant to be simultaneous with Goodwood, isn't it?
Yes.
But it isn't.
Because Saint-Lô hasn't been captured.
Yep.
And it isn't captured until the 18th of July.
Yeah.
So they're within spitting distance on the 17th, but it's not until same day that Goodwood's launched that actually Saint-Lô is captured. And the plan for Cobra is to then go kind of a couple of days later. And in actual fact, they're still planning, because they don't want to kind of get too detailed on Cobra until they know when Saint-Lô is fought. That is an absolute prerequisite. So if you imagine sort of Saint-Lô in the middle, and if you're looking at the map, you've got the Normandy coast to the north. This big ridge line, Hill 192, where 29th Infantry Division have been attacking down towards Saint-Lô, that is to the kind of top right of Saint-Lô on the map. Yeah. Whereas the attack area for Cobra is to the top left. Yeah. But you need to secure Cobra to Saint-Lô before you can
protect your flank as you go, because you don't want a proper counter-attack coming out of Saint-Lô. Yeah.
So what happens on the 19th of July, Bradley and Pete Quesada, the commander of 9th Fighter Command, fly to England for a big powwow with Lee Mallory, not a friend of the show, Spots and Tedder, to talk about the air operation. And Bradley's got a very kind of, he's worked out with Quesada, they've got their headquarters, they're having dinner every night and palling and drinking back the bourbon and all the rest of it. So they've really thought through what they could do. And Quesada's going, well, I think, what we could do is this, and we could have our armoured column cover overhead, and what you want to do is you want to saturate the area. You don't want to kind of pound it with big heavy bombs. You just want to saturate it so that the armour can still go through afterwards without this kind of moonscape. Yeah. And so Bradley is expecting to be pushed back, particularly after kind of what has happened on Goodwood the day before. Yeah. But actually, he finds them all really, really up for it. Yeah. So what they're going to do is they've got fighter bombers of the 9th Air Force going to strike first, hitting German defences immediately south of the Saint-Lô-Perrier road, which is the road over which they're going to attack. And it's kind of a road that roughly goes, it's an old Roman road.
It's a Roman road,
goes sort of west to east. And then Spots' heavies are going to bomb an area 7,000 yards wide by 2,500 yards deep. So roughly kind of 3 miles by 1.5 miles.
And cut a hole, essentially.
Cut a hole, yeah. So 3.5 miles by 1.5. And this is just, to the northwest of Saint-Lô. And each heavy bomber is going to carry 40 100-pound bombs. And so the total area is going to be saturated by 72,000 100-pound bombs. Oh, then the medium bombers are going to come over, and then more fighter bombers. So this is 1,800 heavies, 300 mediums, 350 fighters. I mean, wow. I mean, that is some bit of air power, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and interesting, isn't it, that, as you say, it's immediately after Goodwood, and there isn't anyone saying, I'm not sure about this, or it didn't work over at Goodwood. There isn't, which does lead one to suspect that a lot of that comes later. That at the time, carry on, carry on. We need, you know, let you know what I mean.
Yes,
Jim.
but also on the 19th, you know, it's not completely clear that Goodwood's failed.
Well, exactly, but this is my point. That there's an awful lot of divination after the event.
But I don't think Goodwood does fail. It just doesn't achieve its breakthrough.
Yeah, which it's not intended to do anyway. The thing is, though...
it's where do you put the ground forces when all this is going on?
Yeah. Because it all comes down to a bomb line, basically, doesn't it?
And Lee Mallory says, well, it's got to be at least 3,000 yards to the north.
Yeah.
And Bradley goes, I sort of think about 800.
Yeah.
And they compromise and end up with 1,200 yards.
Yep.
Which is still not very many. It's like 3/4 mile.
It's not good. It's not good, and as we'll see.
So he also wants them to attack on an east-west axis.
Yeah.
And, you know, they just point out, you know, Spots and Taylor just go, that is not possible with that number of bombers.
Yeah.
It has to be on the kind of the 3.5 mile front, because so coming north to south rather than east to west.
Yeah.
Because you just can't do that.
Yeah. It won't work.
It won't work.
Yeah. So it's fighting Joe Collins' 7 Corps.
Yep.
9th Division on the west, 30th Division on the east, 4th Division in the middle. And the idea is that 9th and 4th strike towards Marigny, then 9th towards west to Coutances. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting, striking west as well as...
so they're going south and then curling around to the west to try and cut off the retreat of 17th Panzer Grenadier and the Das Reich, 2nd Das Reich, which is now finally at the front. I've got to say, I've always had a massive soft spot for the 9th Infantry Division. They tend to be kind of... they were in Tunisia and did very well there. They were then in Sicily, latter half of Sicily, did really well there. They're kind of... they sort of go under the radar, but they are consistently brilliant throughout the entire war.
Yeah. And once they've done that, the idea is that 2nd and 3rd Armoured Divisions with the big red one, then...
And the others riding shotgun.
Push through.
Yeah.
So this is 6 divisions. It's 1,000 gun barrels. It's 140,000 shells stockpiled, ready to go. 1,200 Shermans, 694 Stuart. I mean, this is...
288 tank destroyers.
This is, M10s. This is a
big force.
A big force. And the German armour is up the other end of the lodgement.
Yeah, well, there's 3 German Panzer divisions or Panzer mobile divisions there. You've got Panzerlehr, remnants of, you know, shadow of what it was. You've got 17th Panzer Grenadier, shadow of what it was, and Das Reich, which is still in reasonable fettle.
Yeah, but it's had a rough ride getting to Normandy anyway.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at here, I mean, it is extraordinary. The numbers laid bare. 640,000 British and Canadian troops in Normandy, 812,000 American troops.
Already.
So the balance has tipped. 490,000 German troops. The Germans have already lost 117,000 with only 10,078 replacements. So
in that entire time?
Yeah.
Just 10,000 replacements.
But the Germans are also putting out fires in the east at this point too. So they're being pulled from pillar to post. Give in. So the Allies have a 3.8 to 1 manpower advantage. So kind of a 4 to 1 manpower advantage in Normandy, which is, I mean, that's an awful lot of people to fit into that space, isn't it?
We need to get going.
Yeah, exactly. So Cobra's held up by the weather, though. So this is all ready to go, but bad weather scuppers it. So they're starting to look, I mean, at a glance, they're starting to look less coordinated, Goodwood and Cobra, whereas the intention is they happen at the same time, and the Germans basically don't know which way to look.
Don't know which way to look.
But the weather as it is holds things up. There's more fighting on Hill 112, which is Operation Exercise.
Which is totally forgotten. It's like Operation Strike in Tunisia.
Yeah.
It's so good that no one remembers it.
Yeah.
And a report that was made afterwards says, it has been said of this battle that it was a set piece in which all the precepts of the training manuals were fulfilled. I quite like. Nice and pithy, to the point. And in time-honoured fashion, that's all we're going to say about Operation Exercise.
Exactly. But what I love about that, you know, how tidy is that language? It's basically, that's the sound of staff officers high-fiving each other for all eternity. And
yes.
But no. 23rd, it's misty and grey, so no Cobra. Weather's good for the 24th.
Looking better.
Yeah. The Germans are all over the place. They're in a terrible state.
Yep.
I mean, you look at Panzerlehr have lost 5,000 of their 17,000 men. They're then obviously ordered to launch, even though they're in that state.
When they move over the beginning of July.
Yeah, ordered to launch an immediate counterattack.
Before they've wrecked the ground.
Exactly. Lose another 500 men and 24 tanks.
Yep.
So they're a skeleton force by the time Cobra's in the wind. And Byline keeps saying, please, can I withdraw? And he's... 9.
Yep.
And, of course... the July plot has happened. So asking to withdraw has a different texture and a tone, doesn't it? If you ring
really,
up,
really does.
You know, maybe you're on the side of the plotters if you're ringing around saying the war's over.
So 84th Corps is now commanded by General Lieutenant Dietrich von Choltitz after Marx is killed on whatever it was, the 12th of June. And he again on the 24th of July says, please can I withdraw? And Scholtitz says, let me refer to my superiors. And the answer is, of course,
no. Yeah. But Cobra's called off.
Because of bad weather suddenly comes in.
But this is interesting because, and this shows how complicated all of this is, 300 bombers have already set off.
They can't be recalled.
It can't be recalled. 550 tons of bombs are dropped. And 25 American troops are killed and 131 wounded by accident because a bomber drops his bombs and obviously the guys behind him do the same.
Yep.
Because that's how it works.
Yep.
And it's a terrible, terrible business,
yep.
but also the risk of your shorter bomb line as well, writ large. And then finally, Cobra happens on the 25th of July.
And this is your full weight of, 1,000 plus bombers coming over.
Right.
And fighters and medium bombers and all the rest of it. And Ernie Part is actually, by this point, only 800 yards back. And before the next 2 hours, I would have given every penny, every desire, every hope I ever had to have been just another 800 yards further back. I've never known a storm or a machine or any resolve of man that had about it the aura of such ghastly relentlessness. The feeling of the blast was sensational. The air struck us in hundreds of continuing flutters. Our ears drummed and rang. We could feel quick little waves of concussion on the chest and in the eyes.
Yeah. I mean, all of these accounts are basically hell on earth, aren't they?
Oh, it's
simple as that. Some of the bombing's accurate, but then some of it isn't.
Well, most of it is. It's just the problem is that the smoke drifts.
Yeah, so, which is after all a thing that happens when you bomb. I mean,
Which is why, credit where credit due, Lee Mallory is going, I think 3,000 yards is probably the right way. That would have saved everybody had he been listened to.
Well, and amongst them, General Leslie McNair
yes.
is killed,
yep.
who's come to have a look.
Who's equivalent of Ronald Adam.
Yeah, come out to look at stuff. He's killed along with 110 others and 490 wounded in action. It's the best part of a battalion's worth of people.
Yep.
However, the good news is Panzerlehr are annihilated.
Yep, completely. I mean, they're just absolutely in pieces. Literally everyone who is in that area is just gone.
Yeah, and again, byline, the whole place looked like a moon landscape. Everything was burned and blasted. It was impossible to bring up a vehicle or recover the others that were damaged. The survivors were like madmen and could not be used for anything. There are accounts of the Goodwood bombing are the same. People just start staring mad with it.
Absolutely.
It drives them crazy, yeah.
And who can blame them?
Yeah, exactly. But the initial assault is slow, makes little progress, and you get that thing that starts to creep in of like, what do we got to do around here? Yeah. We've delivered all this air power. We've taken our own casualties in the process of, curating this battle space by bombing the crap out of it. And things are getting stuck.
They're getting stuck. They're not making a huge amount of progress. And it looked even worse on the morning of the 26th of July, the following day. However, Lightning Joe Collins has had the sense to kind of sense there was that's that sixth sense of experience that he's had all that time of kind of operating in Guadalcanal and then over here and all this, and brings all that experience to bear and goes, no, this is the time. This is the time to strike. So he brings up his armour early and goes, just go for it. Yep. Gets everyone into their half tracks and their armoured cars, gets the infantry clambering onto the tanks, and just sends through second armoured and third armoured and just goes, just go for it. And it works.
Yeah.
And suddenly the front just absolutely crumbles. It's a bit like Dinghy Young on the Myrna Dam. That, you don't think it is, and suddenly it's just there it goes. Yeah. And you've got the hedge cutters. They're tearing through the hedges. And this is the interesting thing that Cameron Ross's recent work on all that archaeology has proved that the hedge cutters worked very successfully. You've got armoured column cover from the air forces who are just pounding it. And suddenly, because the Germans are streaming south, they're streaming south in daylight because they're running away, and that means the fighter bombers are just pouncing on them.
And on the 27th of July,
the breakthrough happens.
So Goodwood and Cobra have paid off.
The double fist.
The double fist, the matador and his cape.
All that.
And all that stuff, it's all paid off. Join us for our next episode where we talk about...
Very possibly our final episode.
Maybe our final episode. But maybe we get to fillets, who knows. Thanks very much for listening. If you want to listen to all of these in one delicious, juicy lump, then the best way to do that is to go either to our Patreon, We Have Ways of Making You Talk Patreon, and become a member of our burgeoning... we're more than brigades. We're sort of battle group size now in terms of numbers there. Or go to our Apple subscription channel where everything's curated, laid out for you in subject matter, not not just these big series, but previous long runs we've done. Dunkirk, Mighty Eighth, Inevitable Arnhem Chat, Burma, whatever. And you can navigate your way around the subjects and find your way through. And of course, that's all ad-free if you subscribe, so you don't have to listen to, Pile Ointment or whatever we're plugging at the moment. I'm not sure. Thanks again for listening. We will be back with more. And of course, there will be, following on from this, us in Normandy walking the ground, standing by a hedge and going, "Core, did it really happen here?" Which I'm sure you will enjoy immensely. Thanks for listening, and cheerio.
Cheerio.
Hello listeners, it's Anita Anand here from the Goalhanger sister podcast Empire, which I host along with
me, William Dalrymple, and we are here to tell you about our new series on the Founding Fathers, the men who made America.
We wanted to look at the men who actually founded the country, who dreamt the dream, who wrote the words upon which a country would be born. What were they like? What made them do what they did? What did they actually believe in? And how did they come to play the role that they did in the American Revolution and the creation of America?
What really interested me about this was the contradictions. I mean, we expect these men to be great figures. We've seen the portraits in the galleries. We know the faces from the banknotes, but they're deeply complex figures. But in that blend of contradiction and intellectual power and writing genius and curiosity and raw ability lies the nuance and complexity that allows us to understand them. And the United States is in many ways a reflection of them, their beliefs, their experiences.
These are the men who wrote the Constitution. These are the men who created the federal system in every way. They are totally fundamental to what American politics looks like today.
It all goes back to this extraordinary group of men.
Yeah, and they have rip-roaring yarns as well, let me tell you. So if you want to know why America is the way it is and who the men were who made it, you can listen by searching Empire wherever you get your podcasts.